around with our Twitch stuff. The point of this is to try and get the cash to get a decent webcam microphone set up so that we're not using this tiny little one that we're currently using, and hopefully just make the whole thing a little bit more pro, which would be nice. So if you want to drop a tip, that would be great. If you're watching this on YouTube at some future point, you might need to actually come to Twitch to do it. Pro streaming, yo. That's me. We can only try. Okay. Jeez. I've also popped in the chat. You will see that there is a link to the YouTube playlist that, because we have all the previous chapters of the Scarlet Pimpernel on YouTube on a playlist, so you can catch up nice and easy, as long as you have a few hours to just listen to me read you stories, which, you know, you all have at the moment, because everybody's in their house forever, right? So you may as well spend some of your spare hours listening to me read about the French Revolution. Because why wouldn't you? I mean, I agree. There are worse ways to spend an evening. It's quite a fun story, so, you know, it'll be cool. All right. I'm a little bit all over the place today. I'm sorry. I don't know what that's about. But yeah, we're reading the Scarlet Pimpernel. So far, Marguerite Blakeney has found herself in a very difficult position because she is married to one of the wealthiest men in England, but he is terribly boring and dull, and her brother is off in France, possibly rescuing aristocrats from the guillotine, possibly helping the revolutionaries. It's a bit vague whose side he's actually on. She is personally sympathetic towards the Republicans, but thinks that they are taking things too far and maybe killing a whole bunch of people is not the best idea. And is also quite taken with the romanticism of the Scarlet Pimpernel. So when one of the French dudes showed up and tried to blackmail her into finding out for him what the identity of the Scarlet Pimpernel is, she was less than thrilled with the idea. But he has evidence that her brother is a horrible traitor. So he has basically promised to her to make sure that her brother is safe as long as she can find out for him who the Scarlet Pimpernel is. And they are now all at a ball. And it's all very civilized, and they're all being civilized at each other in the most sarcastic fashion, and it's a delight. I just have to say that as a slight costuming nerd, I love how the Baroness makes a real point of describing everybody's outfits in great detail. So that's always fun. We're on chapter 12, and it is called The Scrap of Paper. Marguerite suffered intensely. Though she laughed and chatted, though she was more admired, more surrounded, more fated than any woman there, she felt like one condemned to death, living her last day upon this earth. Her nerves were in a state of painful tension, which had increased 100-fold during that brief hour which she had spent in her husband's company, between the opera and the ball. The short ray of hope, that she might find in this good-natured, lazy individual a valuable friend and adviser, had vanished as quickly as it had come the moment she found herself alone with him. The same feeling of good-humoured contempt which one feels for an animal, or a faithful servant, made her turn away with a smile from the man who should have been her moral support in this heart-rending crisis, through which she was passing. Who should have been her cool-headed adviser, when feminine sympathy and sentiment tossed her hither and thither between her love for her brother, who was far away and in mortal peril, and horror of the awful service which Chauvelin had exacted from her in exchange for Armand's safety. There he stood, the moral support, the cool-headed adviser, surrounded by a crowd of brainless, empty-headed young fops, who were even now repeating from mouth to mouth, and with every sign of the keenest enjoyment, a doggerel quatrain which he had just given forth. Everywhere the absurd, silly words met her. People seemed to have little else to speak about. Even the prince had asked her, with a little laugh, whether she appreciated her husband's latest poetic efforts. All done in the tying of a cravat, Sir Percy had declared to his clique of admirers. We seek him here, we seek him there, those Frenchies seek him everywhere. Is he in heaven? Is he in hell? That damned elusive Pimpernel. Sir Percy's bon mot had gone the round of the brilliant reception rooms. The prince was enchanted. He vowed that life without Blakeney would be but a dreary desert. Then, taking him by the arm, had led him to the card-room and engaged him in a long game of hazard. Sir Percy, whose chief interest in most social gatherings seemed to centre around the card-table, usually allowed his wife to flirt, dance, to amuse or bore herself as much as she liked. And tonight, having delivered himself of his bon mot, he had left Marguerite surrounded by a crowd of admirers of all ages, all anxious and willing to help her to forget that somewhere in the spacious reception rooms there was a long, lazy being who had been fool enough to suppose that the cleverest woman in Europe would settle down to the prosaic bonds of English matrimony. Her still overwrought nerves, her excitement and agitation, lent beautiful Marguerite Blakeney much additional charm. Escorted by a veritable bevy of men of all ages, and of most nationalities, she called forth many exclamations of admiration from everyone as she passed. She would not allow herself any more time to think. Her early, somewhat bohemian training had made her something of a fatalist. She felt that events would shape themselves, that the directing of them was not in her hands. From Chauvelin she knew that she could expect no mercy. He had set a price upon Armand's head, and left it to her to pay or not, as she chose. Later on in the evening she caught sight of Sir Andrew Ffoulkes and Lord Anthony Dewist, who seemingly had just arrived. She noticed at once that Sir Andrew immediately made for little Suzanne de Tournay, and that the two young people soon managed to isolate themselves in one of the deep embrasures of the mullioned windows, there to carry on a long conversation, which seemed very earnest and very pleasant on both sides. Both the young men looked a little haggard and anxious, but otherwise they were irreproachably dressed, and there was not the slightest sign about their courtly demeanour of the terrible catastrophe which they must have felt hovering around them and around their chief. That the League of the Scarlet Pimpernel had no intention of abandoning its cause, she had gathered through little Suzanne herself, who spoke openly of the assurance she and her mother had had that the Comte de Tournay would be rescued from France by the League within the next few days. Vaguely she began to wonder, as she looked at the brilliant and fashionable crowd in the gaily lighted ballroom, which of these worldly men around her was the mysterious Scarlet Pimpernel, who held the threads of such daring plots and the fate of valuable lives in his hands. A burning curiosity seized her to know him, although for months she had heard of him and had accepted his anonymity, as everyone else in society had done. But now she longed to know, quite impersonally, quite apart from Armand, and quite apart from Chauvelin, only for her own sake, for the sake of the enthusiastic admiration she had always bestowed on his bravery and cunning. He was at the ball, of course, somewhere, since Sir Andrew Ffoulkes and Lord Anthony Dewist were here, evidently expecting to meet their chief, and perhaps to get a fresh mot d'ordre from him. Don't judge my French. Marguerite looked around at everyone, at the aristocratic, high-typed Norman faces, the squarely built, fair-haired Saxon, the more gentle, humorous cast of the cult, wondering which of these betrayed the power, the energy, the cunning which had imposed its will, and its leadership upon a number of high-born English gentlemen, among whom rumour asserted was his Royal Highness himself. Sir Andrew Ffoulkes? Surely not, with his gentle blue eyes, which were looking so tenderly and longingly after little Suzanne, who was being led away from the pleasant tete-a-tete by her stern mother. Marguerite watched him across the room as he finally turned away with a sigh, and seemed to stand aimless and lonely now that Suzanne's dainty little figure had disappeared in the crowd. She watched him as he strolled towards the doorway which led to a small boudoir beyond, then paused and leaned against the framework of it, looking still anxiously all around him. Marguerite contrived for the moment to evade her present attentive cavalier, and she skirted the fashionable crowd, drawing nearer to the doorway against which Sir Andrew was leaning. Why she wished to get closer to him she could not have said. Perhaps she was impelled by an all-powerful fatality, which so often seems to rule the destinies of men. Suddenly she stopped. Her very heart seemed to stand still. Her eyes, large and excited, flashed for a moment towards that doorway, then as quickly were turned away again. Sir Andrew Ffoulkes was still in the same listless position by the door, but Marguerite had distinctly seen that Lord Hastings, a young buck, a friend of her husband's, and one of the prince's set, had, as he quickly brushed past him, slipped something into his hand. For one moment longer, oh, it was the merest flash, Marguerite paused. The next, she had with admirably played unconcern resumed her walk across the room, but this time more quickly towards that doorway whence Sir Andrew had now disappeared. All this from the moment that Marguerite had caught sight of Sir Andrew leaning against the doorway, until she followed him into the little boudoir beyond, had occurred in less than a minute. Fate is usually swift when she deals a blow. Now Lady Blakeney had suddenly ceased to exist. It was Marguerite St. Just who was there only. Marguerite St. Just had passed her childhood, her early youth, in the protecting arms of her brother Armand. She had forgotten everything else, her rank, her dignity, her secret enthusiasms, everything save that Armand stood in peril of his life, and that there, not 20 feet away from her, in the small boudoir which was quite deserted, in the very hands of Sir Andrew Ffoulkes, might be the talisman which would save her brother's life. Barely another 30 seconds had elapsed between the moment when Lord Hastings slipped the mysterious something into Sir Andrew's hand, and the one when she, in her turn, reached the deserted boudoir. Sir Andrew was standing with his back to her, and close to a table upon which stood a massive silver candelabra. A slip of paper was in his hand, and he was in the very act of perusing its contents. Unperceived, her soft clinging robe making not the slightest sound upon the heavy carpet, not daring to breathe until she had accomplished her purpose, Marguerite stood close behind him, and at the moment he looked around and saw her, she uttered a groan, passed her hand across her forehead, and murmured faintly, "The heat in the room was terrible. I felt so faint. Ah!" She tottered almost as if she would fall, and Sir Andrew, quickly recovering himself, and crumpling in his hand the tiny note he had been reading, was only apparently just in time to support her. "You are ill, Lady Blakeney?" he asked with much concern. "Let me—" No, nothing," she interrupted quickly. "A chair, quick." She sank into a chair close to the table, and throwing back her head, closed her eyes. "There," she murmured, still faintly. "The giddiness is passing off. Do not heed me, Sir Andrew. I assure you I already feel better." At moments like these there is no doubt, and psychologists actually assert it, that there is in us a sense which has absolutely nothing to do with the other five. It is not that we see, it is not that we hear or touch, yet we seem to do all three at once. Marguerite sat there with her eyes apparently closed. Sir Andrew was immediately behind her, and on her right was the table with the five-armed candelabra upon it. Before her mental vision there was absolutely nothing but Armand's face. Armand, whose life was in the most imminent danger, and who seemed to be looking at her from a background upon which were dimly painted the seething crowd of Paris, the bare walls of the Tribunal of Public Safety, with Ffoulkes, the public prosecutor, demanding Armand's life in the name of the people of France, and the lurid guillotine with its stained knife waiting for another victim, Armand. For one moment there was dead silence in the little boudoir. Beyond, from the brilliant ballroom, the sweet notes of the gavotte, the frou-frou of rich dresses, the talk and laughter of a large and merry crowd came as a strange, weird accompaniment to the drama which was being enacted here. Sir Andrew had not uttered another word. Then it was that extra sense became potent in Marguerite Blakeney. She could not see, for her two eyes were closed. She could not hear, for the noise from the ballroom drowned the soft rustle of that momentous scrap of paper. Nevertheless, she knew, as if she had both seen and heard, that Sir Andrew was even now holding the paper to the flame of one of the candles. At the exact moment that it began to catch fire, she opened her eyes, raised her hand, and with two dainty fingers had taken the burning scrap of paper from the young man's hand. Then she blew out the flame and held the paper to her nostril with perfect unconcern. "How thoughtful of you, Sir Andrew," she said gaily. "Surely 'twas your grandmother who taught you that the smell of burnt paper was a sovereign remedy against giddiness." She sighed with satisfaction, holding the paper tightly between her jewelled fingers, that talisman which perhaps would save her brother Armand's life. Sir Andrew was staring at her, too dazed for the moment to realize what had actually happened. He had been taken so completely by surprise that he seemed quite unable to grasp the fact that the slip of paper which she held in her dainty hand was one perhaps on which the life of his comrade might depend. Marguerite burst into a long, merry peal of laughter. "Why do you stare at me like that?" she said playfully. "I assure you I feel much better. Your remedy has proved most effectual. This room is most delightfully cool," she added, with the same perfect composure, "and the sound of the gavotte from the ballroom is fascinating and soothing." She was prattling on in the most unconcerned and pleasant way, whilst Sir Andrew, in an agony of mind, was racking his brains as to the quickest method he could employ to get that bit of paper out of that beautiful woman's hand. Instinctively, vague and tumultuous thoughts rushed through his mind. He suddenly remembered her nationality, and worst of all, recollected that horrible and the Marquis de St. which in England no one had credited for the sake of Sir Percy, as well as for her own. "What, still dreaming and staring?" she said, with a merry laugh. "You are most ungallant, Sir Andrew. And now I come to think of it, you seemed more startled than pleased when you saw me just now. I do believe, after all, that it was not concern for my health, nor yet a remedy taught you by your grandmother that caused you to burn this tiny scrap of paper. I vow, it must have been your lady love's last cruel epistle you were trying to destroy. Now confess," she added, playfully holding up the scrap of paper, "does this contain her final congé, or a last appeal to kiss and make friends?" "Whichever it is, Lady Blakeney," said Sir Andrew, who was gradually recovering his self-possession, "this little note is undoubtedly mine, and, not caring whether his action was one that would be styled ill-bred towards a lady, the young man had made a bold dash for the note. But Marguerite's thoughts flew quicker than his own. Her actions, under pressure of this intense excitement, were swifter and more sure. She was tall and strong. She took a quick step backwards and knocked over the small Sheraton table, which was already top-heavy, and which fell down with a crash, together with the massive candelabra upon it. She gave a quick cry of alarm. "The candles, Sir Andrew, quick!" There was not much damage done. One or two of the candles had blown out as the candelabra fell. Others had merely sent some grease upon the valuable carpet. One had ignited the paper shade over it. Sir Andrew quickly and dexterously put out the flames, and replaced the candelabra upon the table. But this had taken him a few seconds to do, and those seconds had been all that Marguerite needed, to cast a quick glance at the paper and to note its contents. A dozen words in the same distorted handwriting she had seen before, and bearing the same device, a star-shaped flower drawn in red ink. When Sir Andrew once more looked at her, he only saw in her face alarm at the untoward accident, and relief at its happy issue. Whilst the tiny and momentous note had apparently fluttered to the ground, eagerly the young man picked it up, and his face looked much relieved as his fingers closed tightly over it. "For shame, Sir Andrew," she said, shaking her head with a playful sigh, "making havoc in the heart of some impressionable duchess, whilst conquering the affections of my sweet little Suzanne. Well, well, I do believe it was Cupid himself who stood by you and threatened the entire Foreign Office with destruction by fire, just on purpose to make me drop love's message before it had been polluted by my indiscreet eyes. To think that, a moment longer and I might have known the secrets of an erring duchess. Weren't the French all about wives and girlfriends? Well, I mean, being a mistress in this sort of period of time, I believe was, it was well accepted. But she's in England now, and she's playing an Englishman for a fool, so I guess she's using the things she has at her disposal. "You will forgive me, Lady Blakeney," said Sir Andrew, now as calm as she was herself, "if I resume the interesting occupation which you had interrupted." "By all means, Sir Andrew. How should I venture to thwart the love-god again? Perhaps he would mete out some terrible chastisement against my presumption. Burn your love-token, by all means." Sir Andrew had already twisted the paper into a long spill, and was once again holding it to the flame of the candle, which had remained alight. He did not notice the strange smile on the face of his fair vis-à-vis, so intent was he on the work of destruction. Perhaps, had he done so, the look of relief would have faded from his face. He watched the fateful note as it curled under the flame. Soon the last fragment fell on the floor, and he placed his heel upon the ashes. "And now, Sir Andrew," said Marguerite Blakeney, with the pretty nonchalance peculiar to herself, and with the most winning of smiles, "will you venture to excite the jealousy of your fair lady by asking me to dance the minuet?" And that is the end of the chapter. Oh, oops. Was that in reference to Marguerite playing the Englishman? I think that certainly during like aristocratic France time, it was well accepted to have a mistress, if you were of a certain class or whatever. And it definitely didn't have the same level of stigma, I guess, as it did in England. But obviously they're in England now, and Andrew is fuckery, well, that too. He is English, so she's totally using her, like, French waywardness to fuck with his head, basically. And make him think that she's just interested in the gossipiness of it, and, meanwhile she actually has much more something Wow, words. I don't know. Hey, Llama Cornato, did you go away already? I don't know if you went away already, but if you didn't, hi, welcome. I hope you enjoyed the bit of this that you heard. Yeah. It's an interesting one because I feel like it probably existed just as much in England, but it wasn't as socially acceptable to like put your mistress up in a second house and provide for her the way it was in France. So if you were going to be a mistress at that time, you wanted to be in France because you would be much better looked after. Yeah, it was that whole like super Protestant thing, I think, that like, you know, very like fire and brimstone, sin is bad, puritanical kind of attitude to things. I think even at this stage, like the French revolutionaries were, at least in theory, atheists. Like they believed that the church was the source of a lot of the problems. And at least some of them were. I don't think that they were all actual non-believers, and I imagine that many of them were kind of secretly still Christian, but the revolution as a whole was quite into the idea of secularism and the distinction of, for all this book is definitely like anti-revolutionary in a lot of ways. They had some good points, like maybe chopping off a bunch of people's heads. It's not the nicest thing to do, but they kind of had a point, to be honest. I would probably have been on their side mostly. I generally object to murder, but you know, like, yeah, they had a lot of points about democracy and the aristocracy. So, compost the rich, I say. Don't eat them. They would be really bad for you. If only you could do that these days. What, just guillotine them? I mean, you probably could, but it would probably cause very different problems now than it did back then. I mean, it's morally problematic, you know? But having said that, like I said, I sort of see their point. Like, they were freaking sick and tired of these people having all the money and spending all the money. And to be honest, not that much has changed in some parts of the world. There's still a small class of people who have all the money and spend all the money. I don't think we should guillotine them, but I think we should tax the fuck out of them and put the money into like schools and hospitals. That's what I think. Because they suck. I do believe it is morally reprehensible to be a billionaire. Sorry, babe. If I ever like really make it and am a billionaire, I won't be a billionaire for long because I will probably give all my money away. I won't give it all away, but I would give a significant amount of it away and like start up programs. And like, this is the thing when people are like, what do you dream about? If you were really, really rich, what would you do? And the stuff that I legitimately daydream about is like starting schools and like mental health programs and support things for like single moms. And like, that's the stuff I think about doing. Animal shelters, that kind of stuff. We can, but you know. Yeah, I mean, that's it. Like, yeah, we would get our nice house and it would have a workshop and a library and an indoor swimming pool, because I need an indoor swimming pool in this country because it's too freaking cold to swim outside, and a garden. But that's not going to be billions of dollars. That's like a few million, maybe. And the rest we can like make an animal shelter and like, you know, look after kids. Not just our ones, lots of kids, schools. Imagine if you could just like go to a low decile school and be like, hey, do you guys want like $1 million? Here you go. That'd be awesome. Imagine if I could just like go to every school in the Waikato and say, do you guys want a trip to the zoo? I'll just pay for a trip to the zoo for you. Yeah, right? See? I'm not the only one. I think there are actually a lot of people who feel this way. Imagine being able to just like go onto GoFundMe or those things and just just drop money in them and just be like, here you go, you hit your goal. Go and get that car. Go get that teeth dental work. Go get that surgery. Take care of your puppy. Don't worry about the vet bills. Like, you know? Yeah, I know. Yeah. Like, I cannot imagine having that much money and not wanting to use it to make the world better. But clearly, that's not what they use it for, so fuck them. Guillotine time! That was a very ineffectual guillotine that I just made. Well, I think that this is how they get all the money, is the thing. Is that the reason that they have all that money is because they, on their way to it, they don't care about anybody else. Because I don't think you can make that level of money if you care about your people. Like, the reason Jeff Bezos, now you've gotten me on a soapbox, you see what's happened? But the reason Jeff Bezos has so much money is because he fucks his employees. And I don't mean that in a literal sense. I mean, like, he pays them shit and gives them terrible... Is that an actual command? You should make an actual command. It should, like, make an animation happen when I start on a rant. And he, like, actively destroyed any competitors to Amazon by underpricing books to the point when nobody could afford to... Like, they make a loss on books on Amazon because they can afford to make a loss. And that's how they got the monopoly on it. And so people still will buy books from Amazon because it's cheaper than anywhere else. Because no one who's actually making money from buying books can compete. Because people who are doing that for realsies can't afford to make a loss. Madame Guillotine, yeah, there we go. Fucking billionaires. And this whole situation in the world right now just proves everyone who was always like, oh, but the billionaires would help us if it really came. No, they wouldn't. And this proves that they wouldn't, because if they would be doing it now. And they're not. So, guillotine. Big fucking taxes. That's what I reckon. I'm really kind of hoping that when we come out of all this coronavirus stuff, that a lot of mindsets change in the world and we start to understand that capitalism is dumb and bad and we should change it. They've already started putting in universal basic income in Spain, or talking about putting in universal basic income in Spain as a result of this. And I think that that is amazing. That's what we should have. Like, we live in a society, so we should take care of everyone in the society, not just the productive people. And I say this as a very productive person. Anyway, I'm done soapboxing now. Give me another topic. Capitalism bad. Rah, viva la Republic. I suppose you should have known this would happen sooner or later when I'm reading a book about the French Revolution, because that was a lot of what the French Revolution was based on. Okay, it is 2 o'clock, and I've had my rant, and I've read my chapter. I do not actually condone murder, and we probably shouldn't kill the aristocrats, but I do think that we should take their money and give it to, like, kids and animals and schools and hospitals and doctors and etc. Teachers. And people who actually make food and, you know, etc. Ordinary folk. Okay. I am going to go away now. You are all awesome. Squad 12 girl, I don't know where you came from, but clearly we agree on many things, so I hope you hang around. In the future, I do this every day. Well, every weekday. And then on the weekend, sometimes I do other things randomly, depending on my mood. And yeah, you all have an excellent whatever it is where you are. Morning, afternoon, evening, night, 3 a.m. Jax has been on her soapboxes. What did you just... That doesn't even make sense. Did that not do what you were expecting it to do? Do you need me to stay live so you can experiment? He's not replying to me. He's in that room behind me. Yes, okay, fine. In that case, you have to give me something else to rant about. I can keep going on the capitalism thing, but I've sort of said my piece. So, hey, we have 3 viewers now. Who's the other one? Who's lurking? If you're lurking, say hi in the chat. Do it. Chat's that side. Do it. Or maybe chat's that side. Which side is chat on for you? For me, it's on this side. Jax has been on her soapbox times. Oh, number of times. I see what you're doing. You're trying to make it count. Sorry. Our right side. Yeah, but does it... That's my right side. No, well, that's my left side, but in the screen it's the right side. Is that the correct side? Yeah. Awesome. Cool. See, if I point at the chat, it points the wrong way. So, it's confusing. Anyway, where you from, squad girl? How did you discover me? Which of the many little corners of the internet that I didn't really mean that, but me too. I meant like, how did you stumble upon me reading French Revolution literature? I'm guessing if NZ, then it was Critter NZ. That's where most of the New Zealanders come from, I think. If you are a Critter, did you watch the thing today where they did like a broken telephone story? Oh my god, it was so funny. And it made me so happy, and I love them so much. If you're not a Critter, that's not going to make any sense to you. So I hope you're a Critter. Okay. It was very cute. I didn't watch the whole thing because I caught it partway through, but it still made me laugh a lot. So I'm going to have to rewatch it so that I actually get the full effect. How did you know it was Tegan? That's very disconcerting. Okay. It's not Tegan. You're wrong. Hi, Cat. Didn't you have a different name? Weren't you here before at some point and you had a different name? Am I just making that up? I might be making that up. Okay. Fair enough. I was also thinking it was pretty unlikely that Tegan's screen name would be Squad 12 Girl. What is the 12 for? I'm not asking too many questions. You can tell me shut up, Jax. Hi, Tegan. Hi, the both of you. I should watch some anime. The only anime-related things I've ever watched were like the Avatar stuff. So the last Avatar thing. And the Dragon Prince. And Spirited Away. And I think that's it. I believe so. But I've heard some good stuff. It's just, and I worry that if I start down the deep hole, The last time I was like, hey, I should check out this thing, it was Critical Role. And look what happened. So I kind of am a bit scared of doing that sort of thing. Because, yeah, I have a lot more work now than I did before I started doing crit roll stuff. But it's pretty great. Like, I certainly don't regret it, but wow, yeah. Accidentally make a community and stuff. It's weird. But that is a thing I do, apparently. Although I have a lot of cool shit that people have sent me, so that's nice. Adam, am I allowed to turn off yet? Or are you still experimenting? He's faffing about in the background, doing things in the background. Okay. Okay, humans. You all have an excellent day. And stay safe. Stay awesome. I love you.